The sun dipped low behind the hills as my plane landed 2 hours early in the small town of Redstone Ridge. I'd spent the last month in Wyoming closing a deal on a horse breeding partnership, leaving my beloved ranch, Lone Trail Acres, under the supposed watchful eye of the neighborhood HOA. Specifically, one self-appointed dictator, Karen Bancroft, the HOA president with a platinum bob and a god complex. I had a weird feeling all week. Calls went unanswered, cameras mysteriously offline, and then yesterday, I got a flagged alert on my property registry app. Someone had requested title verification on my ranch. I didn't wait for a confirmation. I caught the next flight back. My ranch sat on 23 acres of prime land with a horse barn, trout pond, and a cedar wood cabin I rebuilt with my father before he passed. It wasn't just property, it was family, legacy, sweat, and soul. As the cab crested the gravel road leading to the ranch gate, I froze. A large banner stretched across the entrance, printed in bold red letters. Public auction today, by order of the Redstone Ridge HOA. My jaw locked. People in trucks and SUVs lined the dirt driveway. An inflatable tube man flapped next to a podium where a slimy auctioneer in a dusty cowboy hat shouted bids. And there, center stage, stood Karen. Clipboard in hand, mirrored sunglasses hiding her smug expression, and a phone in the other. Laughing. "Step right up, folks. This beautiful rustic ranch could be yours. We start the bidding at—" I kicked the cab door open and marched toward the crowd. I had half a mind to start yelling, but instead I pulled out my phone and began recording. My boots thudded heavily across the cracked earth as I approached the auctioneer's podium. "Who the hell authorized this auction?" I barked. The auctioneer paused mid-spiel. Karen spun around and took one glance at me, before her mouth curled into a smirk. "Well, well, Mr. Jensen decided to show up," she said, like I'd inconvenienced her. "Folks, don't mind the drama. This gentleman is trespassing. This property is under HOA seizure until further notice." "Trespassing," I growled. "I own this ranch. You have zero legal authority to auction it off." Karen raised her phone like it was a badge. According to Section 12A of the HOA Covenant, properties with unpaid dues and unresolved violations are subject to auction to recover community losses. You haven't responded to notices in over 30 days. Because I was out of state, on business, and I paid my dues up front for the entire year, I snapped. And don't you dare talk to me about community losses when I built half this damn neighborhood's fencing myself. Some of the onlookers were murmuring now. A few began backing toward their vehicles. Karen must have felt control slipping. She stepped forward dramatically and dialed 911. "Yes, hello. This is HOA President Karen Bancroft. I have a dangerous trespasser threatening me and attempting to halt a lawful auction. Please send deputies immediately." I stared at her. "You just called the cops on the landowner. You're about to be arrested for fraud." "Good luck proving anything," she hissed under her breath, walking back to the podium. But she didn't know that I'd just texted the county assessor's office, and they confirmed no legal auction had ever been registered. I also had video evidence of her hosting an unauthorized event on private land. 20 minutes later, a sheriff's SUV pulled in with lights flashing. Out stepped Deputy Rowe, a good friend of my late father's and someone I'd helped during wildfire rescue 2 summers ago. He adjusted his hat, looked from Karen to me, and sighed. "What in God's name is going on here?" Karen rushed forward. "Officer, that man is trespassing and disrupting a sanctioned HOA auction. He's being hostile and threatening buyers." Rowe raised an eyebrow. "That man is Mason Jensen, the owner of this property." The crowd fell dead silent. Karen paled. "Well, he's in violation of HOA code. We sent letters and, under emergency clause 12A, Rowe cut her off. Karen, the HOA doesn't have jurisdiction to seize or sell property without a court order and title clearance, neither of which I see here. She blinked rapidly. Unless you have legal documentation, you need to shut this event down now. Karen's lips quivered as she tried to salvage the moment. This will not go unnoticed. I will be contacting HOA Legal. You do that, I said, stepping beside Rowe. And while you're at it, explain how you bypassed the electronic lock on my gate, stole mail from my box, and tried to sell my ranch under false pretenses. Rowe's eyes narrowed. Wait, she accessed your property without permission? I nodded. I've got surveillance backups uploading to cloud storage as we speak. Karen stammered. This was a misunderstanding. Oh, it was criminal trespass, wire fraud, and attempted grand theft, I said. And I plan to press every charge possible. The sheriff radioed dispatch. Send a second unit and notify DA's office. We've got a potential property fraud case. Karen tried to flee, but the sheriff's deputy cut her off at her Range Rover. You're not going anywhere. As she was handcuffed, she spat. You think you've won? You haven't seen what's coming. The HOA will destroy you. I leaned close. Karen, I am the HOA now, and starting tomorrow I'm calling a full vote to dissolve this corrupt little empire. The auctioneer vanished into his van, and the remaining crowd slinked away. I stood at the edge of my property, breathing in the dust and disbelief. But beneath it all was a slow-burning fire of vengeance. Karen had tried to steal my legacy. Now I was going to tear her entire empire down, piece by piece. The morning after Karen's arrest was oddly quiet. I sipped black coffee on the cabin porch, watching a blue jay flutter near the horse stables. The auction debris was still scattered across the lawn. Folding chairs, empty water bottles, and a ripped "For Sale" sign Karen must have planted just before I arrived. But I wasn't just going to clean up her mess. I was going to expose her. At 7 a.m. sharp, I walked into the Redstone Ridge County Records office. The receptionist, Marla, was a sweet older woman who'd known me since high school. She looked up and nearly spilled her tea. Mason Jensen. Heard the whole town's talking about what happened at Lone Trail. You okay, sweetheart? I'm fine, I said, but I need access to HOA filing records, especially ones related to enforcement actions or auction authorizations. She furrowed her brows. HOAs aren't supposed to file enforcement actions directly here. Only the county attorney or court can register liens or seizure motions. Exactly, I said. She motioned me around the desk. Come on back. Let's see what they've been up to. For the next 3 hours, we combed through scanned documents and handwritten submissions. What I found made my blood boil. Karen had forged a lien claim against my property for unpaid fines and violation penalties, totaling over $28,000. The list included nonsense like unauthorized horse trailer parking, non-regulation fencing materials, unapproved solar panels, excessive barn size. The problem? All of these violations had already been approved by the HOA years ago. I had signatures, emails, and dated photos. Even worse, Karen had filed the fake lien under a shell HOA corporation she registered without member approval. It was a rogue entity, a front. I printed everything. By noon, I walked into the office of Daphne Morales, my longtime attorney and someone who hated HOAs as much as I did. Her eyes scanned the files like a bloodhound catching scent. Oh, this is not just fraud, she said. It's racketeering. She's running a private enforcement scam using HOA power like a mafia boss. She tried to sell my ranch, Daphne. That's attempted theft on a whole new level. And we're going to bury her for it, Daphne said, picking up her phone. But first, we file for an injunction. An hour later, we filed for a temporary restraining order against the Redstone Ridge HOA and Karen's Shell Corporation. The judge approved it on the spot, freezing all HOA actions against my property. But that was just step one. The next day, I called for a full HOA member meeting. I hand-delivered flyers to every house in the neighborhood. Some people closed their doors in my face. Others offered whispered support. Karen had ruled this HOA with fear and fines. But now the mask was off. Friday evening, the community room filled with dozens of homeowners, some anxious, some furious, and a few still clinging to Karen's rules like gospel. I stepped to the podium. For years, I began, this HOA has abused its power under one person's rule. Karen Bancroft acted without oversight, forged documents, and attempted to sell private property. Mine. Gasps filled the room. I held up the forged lien and the illegitimate auction notice. Then I dropped the bombshell. Karen had been collecting illegal administrative fees on every citation and pocketing them through her fake HOA entity. I showed the paper trail. Bank transfers, fake invoices. It was all there. She didn't just break rules, she broke the law. And unless we dissolve this HOA or vote in new leadership with strict oversight, she won't be the last to do it. People murmured, then erupted into heated debate. One man stood. She fined me $3,000 for a basketball hoop last year, said it lowered property value. I paid it to avoid foreclosure threats. She told me my dog was a visual nuisance, another woman shouted. I had to repaint my house twice, someone else muttered, because she said the shade was too cheerful. One by one, their stories came out. Dozens of families bullied, fined, and threatened. I handed out ballots. The vote tonight is simple, I said. Dissolve the HOA entirely, or replace the board with a member-run system and launch a full audit. When the votes came in, it wasn't even close. 78% voted to dissolve. Karen's HOA empire was dead. But I wasn't done. We still had to deal with legal fallout, media backlash, and the bitter truth that she hadn't acted alone. Someone else had helped her forge titles and push those fake fines through the county system. As I left the meeting, I got a call from Daphne. "You're gonna want to sit down for this." "What now?" We found a second name on the forged title transfer form. Karen had help from someone inside the recorder's office, an insider, a man named Cliff Denton. I frowned. Denton? As in Karen's cousin? Bingo. He works night shifts, falsified 3 transfer papers for other properties too. This wasn't just about me. Karen had tried to build an empire, and she nearly succeeded. But I was about to return the favor. Brick by crooked brick, I'd take down every last piece of her corruption. The next morning, I drove straight to the Redstone County Administrative Building, armed with 2 boxes, one filled with documents proving Karen's fraud, the other filled with donuts. The donuts were for the clerks, the documents for war. Inside the building, I met up with Daphne, my attorney. She was already 5 steps ahead, tapping on her laptop and whispering to a federal investigator on a secure line. Cliff Denton clocked in last night, did a system login, and tried scrubbing several line entries, she whispered. But we already got backups through the audit request. I set the box on the desk. Let's make this official. We were escorted into a conference room with the county registrar, Sheriff Rowe, and 2 state-level fraud investigators. They didn't waste time. Daphne stood. What we're presenting today involves multiple layers of fraud, including falsified property liens, illegal auctions, misuse of HOA enforcement authority, and collusion between an HOA president and a government official. She laid out 3 false liens, including mine. Illegally registered corporate entities Karen used to process payments. Altered HOA bylaws, with entire clauses written in different fonts and spacing. Bank transfers between HOA accounts and Karen's personal checking account. Signed documents filed at night, the same time Cliff Denton was on shift. The registrar looked like she might faint. Sheriff Rowe rubbed his jaw. This ain't just local trouble. This is going federal. We want a full forensic audit of the HOA's financials and all activity by Cliff Denton over the past 2 years, Daphne said. Warrants will follow. The sheriff nodded slowly. We'll handle Denton, quietly. As we left the building, Rowe muttered, Can't believe Cliff was part of this. His dad was my football coach. I trusted Karen, too, I said. She helped organize my dad's funeral. That woman smiled in my face while plotting to steal my land. I've seen greed twist people, Mason, he said. But this was organized. She wanted power. Daphne turned to me. Which means there may be others. By nightfall, I was back at the ranch. The wind had shifted. Rain clouds gathered in the distance. But for the first time in days, I felt grounded. That's when my phone buzzed. Unknown number. Text message. You think it's over. You'll wish I only auctioned it. I stared at the screen, then looked out the window. Down the road, a dark SUV sat parked just past the tree line. Headlights off. No movement. I didn't hesitate. I grabbed my old Winchester, called Rowe, and stepped outside. By the time I reached the gate, the SUV peeled off into the trees. Rowe arrived 15 minutes later with his deputy. Plates? He asked. I shook my head. Too far, but the message came from a burner. Rowe examined the tire tracks. Karen's still in holding, but she made bail this afternoon. Her cousin Cliff disappeared an hour ago. Of course, she was out and pissed. 2 days later, I received a certified letter. Karen had filed a civil suit against me for defamation, unlawful interference with public administration, and community destabilization. She was trying to sue me for dismantling the HOA, but that wasn't even the real punch. Attached was an anonymous affidavit stating that I had threatened HOA members with physical harm and that community safety was endangered by my return. She was trying to paint me as unstable, dangerous, a threat. It was a trap. If I got angry in court or reacted emotionally, she'd use it as proof. I had to stay clean, calm, and calculated. Daphne read the suit and laughed. This is desperation, but if she's going scorched earth, we can too. She pulled out a folder labeled Project Burrow. What's that? I asked. The forensic team just pulled Karen's HOA financials for the last 18 months. You know how much she charged in fines last year? No. $212,400. I choked. That's nearly $250,000. And $89,000 of that went directly into a private account she opened in Arizona. We had her, but we needed more. That night, I visited my neighbor, Mrs. Ellison, a retired teacher and one of the first residents in Redstone Ridge. She used to sit on the original HOA board. She poured sweet tea and sighed. We never meant for it to be this way, Mason. We just wanted a neighborhood that took care of itself. I know, but Karen twisted it. She made everyone scared, sent compliance warnings with pictures taken from drones, issued violations for porch lights. You kept records. She smiled and handed me a thick folder. Every email, every fine, every board meeting where she rewrote the rules without a vote. Jackpot. The next morning, Daphne filed a countersuit alleging defamation, malicious prosecution, and abuse of power. We also submitted the financial evidence to the state attorney general's office, pushing for felony charges. The case would be explosive, but I still didn't feel safe. That night, someone threw a rock through my cabin window. No note, no prints. The message was clear. Karen wasn't done. She might have lost the HOA. But now, she wanted revenge. The rock through my cabin window was just the beginning. Over the next few days, things escalated fast. My ranch gates were vandalized with red spray paint, liar in bold, dripping letters. Fence posts were broken, feed bins slashed open. Even my livestock had been spooked and driven out onto the north pasture where the fencing was weakest. Someone was trying to scare me off my own land, but it wasn't going to work. Daphne contacted the sheriff's office again, and Roe assigned 2 patrol cars for nightly drive-bys. But I knew Karen's games weren't just about physical intimidation anymore. This was about reputation, credibility, and driving a wedge between me and the neighborhood. And she'd found a new pawn. A local blogger named Terry Alcott, who ran a gossip site called Redstone Revealed, suddenly published an article titled Ranch Rogue, HOA Dissidents, Violent Past, and Community Takeover. It was filled with lies, claims that I'd once assaulted a neighbor, never happened, suggestions that I'd forged the documents against Karen, laughable, and even a manipulated photo of me standing in front of a no trespassing sign, edited to look like I was flipping off the camera. The damage was immediate. I lost a buyer on my cattle deal. A feed supplier paused shipments, citing reputation concerns. Even the vet called to reschedule, twice. She's trying to bankrupt you slowly, Daphne said. Drive you out of your own property and make you look like a bitter, unstable neighbor. And maybe make room for someone else, I said. Daphne raised an eyebrow. What do you mean? I pulled up an email I'd just received anonymously. It had an attached PDF of a real estate flyer. My ranch, Lone Trail Acres, was listed on a coming soon luxury redevelopment pitch deck. Underneath the banner was a tagline. Imagine a luxury lodge retreat, minutes from town, a fresh start for Redstone Ridge. The company logo was Bancroft Properties. Karen had been planning this for over a year. She wanted my land not for spite, but for profit, and she was going to burn my life down to get it. That night I heard movement near the barn. I grabbed the shotgun, turned on the floodlights, and crept outside. The scent of gasoline hit me before I saw the glint of a can behind the tool shed. I shouted. A figure in a hoodie sprinted for the trees. I fired once into the air, enough to send them running faster but not hit. Sheriff Rowe arrived 10 minutes later, followed by a fire marshal. Someone was gonna torch the place, I said, pointing to the half-empty gas can. There's accelerant all over the barn siding. Rowe's jaw tightened. That's arson, even attempted. But it was the fire marshal who noticed something else. These burn notes, he said, pointing to a pile of soaked paper wads. They're fake inspection tags. Each one was a falsified HOA compliance citation, written up like official warnings, even though the HOA had been dissolved weeks earlier. They were printed on Karen's old letterhead. She was still operating behind the scenes. The next day, we got a break. A former HOA board member, Greg Sanchez, reached out. He was nervous, shaky, but fed up. She tried to pay me to file a false claim against you, he said. Offered me $5,000 in cash to say you threatened my wife during a board meeting. I didn't take it. She's doubling down, Daphne said. Triple, Greg said. She's also offering bribes to 2 other families to claim your fencing project encroached on their land. She's building a paper case, trying to drown you in lawsuits. I asked Greg for a written statement. He agreed, on one condition. I want out of Redstone, he said. I'll testify, but I'm listing my home tomorrow. I don't want to live in the ruins of this mess. I didn't blame him. Back at the ranch, I began documenting everything. I installed motion sensor cameras across all access points. I uploaded daily logs to a cloud server. I gave Daphne full access to monitor footage and alerts. I called in a PR specialist to start rebuilding my online image. And I contacted a local news anchor I trusted, Tasha Gilmore, to tell my side of the story. We filmed a segment titled Landowner Speaks Out Inside the HOA Nightmare at Redstone Ridge. It aired that Sunday night and went viral. Karen's false narrative began to crack. Viewers flooded the station with tips, one claiming they worked for a law firm Karen had approached about bulk buyouts of rural properties. Another said she'd tried to access property deeds under a fake name, Kay Bronson. The heat was turning up. But then came the most dangerous turn yet. On Tuesday, I came home to find my horses missing. The corral gate had been cut clean through. Tracks led toward the woods, but they vanished near the creek. It was deliberate. Roe and I followed the trail until we reached a remote plot of land on the eastern edge of Redstone Ridge. It was unoccupied, overgrown, and stank of manure. We found them there, tied up, hungry but safe. Pinned to one of the trees was a note. "You want a war? Let's make it loud." Roe looked at me. She's done playing politics. She's going full scorched earth. I nodded. Then it's time I fight back the same way. Not with fists, with full-blown exposure. After Tasha Gilmore's segment aired, national news picked it up. HOA tyrant attempts to auction ranch owners' property made it onto the front page of two major outlets. My inbox exploded. Reporters, advocates, victims of other HOAs, and one surprising name, Senator Grayson Carr, who called my situation a perfect example of unchecked HOA tyranny. Karen's carefully constructed image began to collapse, but I wasn't satisfied with just reputation damage. I wanted legal accountability and full exposure of her hidden network. Daphne and I spent the next 3 days finalizing a master file of evidence, forged documents, financial laundering, property theft, attempted arson, harassment, and false police reports. And then we made our move. Thursday morning, we filed a class action lawsuit. 17 homeowners joined me as plaintiffs, each with their own stories of HOA abuse. Daphne presented the suit in front of the press on the courthouse steps, making it clear, this isn't about one man and his ranch. This is about a community terrorized by someone who twisted HOA power into a personal weapon. That ends today. Karen, meanwhile, had vanished. Her home was dark, her SUV gone. Neighbors claimed she'd packed up late at night and left town, but the sheriff's department issued a warrant for Cliff Denton, and financial investigators froze 2 of Karen's bank accounts in Arizona and Texas. But even in hiding, she struck back. A week later, I received a cease and desist letter from a high-powered law firm representing Karen's restored HOA corporation, claiming she still had legal standing over the neighborhood because the original dissolution vote had procedural flaws. It was absurd, but dangerous. She was hoping to stall the lawsuit, bleed us dry in legal fees, and use the delay to twist public perception again. Daphne smiled when she read the letter. That's the move of a cornered animal. Can we counter it? Oh, we're not just countering, she said. We're taking this to the Attorney General. That weekend, we held a public town hall, not just for Redstone Ridge, but for the entire county. Over 300 people showed up. Victims of rogue HOAs, retired veterans fined for flagpoles, elderly homeowners threatened with foreclosure over flower beds. One woman sobbed on stage recounting how her autistic son's therapy ramp was deemed a visual obstruction. It wasn't just my war anymore. It had become a movement. The hashtag number sign Take Back the Land started trending. By Monday, Senator Carr's office introduced a state bill to regulate HOA powers, citing the Redstone Ridge case as its origin. My name was officially in the draft. But just as things turned in our favor, Karen struck from the shadows again. Daphne walked into my cabin, pale-faced, holding a folder. "What's wrong?" I asked. "She's filed a federal lawsuit claiming you hacked her private emails and stole privileged financial data. She's trying to get everything you collected thrown out as inadmissible." I clenched my jaw. "I didn't hack anything. We subpoenaed documents and got the rest from whistleblowers." "She's betting the court won't care about the truth, just the process." Worse, she'd also released a doctored video showing me shouting at one of her fake contractors during the auction confrontation. The clip was spliced to remove context, painting me as aggressive and threatening. Daphne shook her head. "She's losing legally, so now she's going for public opinion." I called a press conference. I stood on my own land in front of the barn she tried to burn down and told the world the full story, start to finish. I played the real footage. I read the real documents. I named names. And I ended it with this. She thought she could take what my father built with his bare hands, that she could twist fear into law and profit off good people's silence. But not anymore. I'm not going anywhere, and neither is this land. The applause was thunderous. The next day, I got a call from the state attorney general's office. "Prepare for trial. We're pressing criminal charges, wire fraud, forgery, attempted grand larceny, and conspiracy." They had enough to arrest Karen Bancroft the moment she returned to the state. But we weren't done yet. Cliff Denton was still missing, and he was the last piece of the puzzle, because hidden in the files Greg Sanchez gave us was a trail of fake LLCs used to funnel HOA fines into real estate shell companies, companies registered under Cliff's name, but tied to a private equity group out of Nevada. Karen wasn't just doing this for herself, she was doing it for investors. Someone else wanted this land, and they weren't done. By now, I had exposed Karen, survived harassment, uncovered forged documents, and weathered a smear campaign. But what Daphne discovered next made everything else look like child's play. "This wasn't just Karen playing queen of the HOA," she said, sliding a file across my desk. "She was working with a private investment group, Sable Ridge Capital." "Never heard of them," I said, flipping through the folder. "They're a shadow real estate acquisition firm," she said. "Shell companies, no public website, but they specialize in flipping distressed properties, especially rural ones with messy HOAs. How do they operate? They scout communities with aging infrastructure or leadership problems. Then they install puppets like Karen to trigger foreclosures and fines, seize land cheap, and push redevelopment. And my ranch was the jewel." "Exactly. Sable Ridge had acquired 3 other properties in the region through similar HOA foreclosure scams. All 3 were now being converted into rustic-themed luxury resorts. Quiet buyouts, no press, no pushback. Until now. We have to go bigger," I told Daphne. "Expose them. Make this public before they sink their hooks in anywhere else." Step 1. Find out who was behind Sable Ridge Capital. Daphne got help from a former IRS forensic accountant. Together, they traced the company's filings back to Delaware, of course, the haven for anonymous corporations. But a leak from a fired assistant gave us the breakthrough we needed. A name. Thomas H. Randall, a real estate magnate known for flipping distressed neighborhoods under shell brands. Randall had been quietly buying up land across 5 states. HOA fines and foreclosure auctions were his specialty, especially when paired with HOA leaders willing to bend the law. Karen wasn't the boss. She was the tool. I called Tasha Gilmore again. This time, I didn't ask for a segment. I asked for an investigative series. She brought in her team. We filmed interviews with other HOA victims, whistleblowers, former employees of Sable Ridge, even a fired contractor who admitted he was paid to sabotage properties so the HOA could issue fines. The series launched under the title Sold Out: The Hidden War for America's Backyard. By the third episode, it was trending nationally. Every network wanted a piece. The DOJ opened a probe. Thomas Randall's lawyers issued threats, but it only fed the story. But Randall wasn't going to take this sitting down. A week later, a convoy of black Escalades rolled up the gravel road to my ranch. Inside was a man dressed like a country club CEO, pressed jeans, boots too clean, and sunglasses worth more than my truck. "Mr. Jensen," he said, "my name is Malcolm Tritt. I represent certain acquisition interests. We'd like to make you an offer." "I'm not selling," I said. "We'll pay double market value, in cash. You'll never hear from us again." "No," he smiled thinly. "You understand, some people would consider your continued resistance unwise." I stepped closer. "You threatening me?" "No, sir. I'm just reminding you that sometimes it's best to take the deal before it's too late." I stared him down. "Tell your boss this ranch isn't for sale. Not now. Not ever." He nodded once, then climbed back into the Escalade. That night, my water pump was sabotaged. Again. I called Rowe, who was already on edge. "This is getting out of hand," he said. "You want 24-hour protection?" I shook my head. "Number, I want you to go after them." "We will, but we need more." That's when Daphne dropped the nuke. "I got the whistleblower to flip," she said. "Karen's former assistant, Sharon. She's willing to testify that Randall met with Karen personally and instructed her to forge liens, fake violations, and keep pressure on you. That's game over, right?" "Almost. Almost. She says she can give us Karen's voice recordings, private strategy meetings, threats, investor planning calls. If we get those," I said, "we burn this whole operation to the ground." We arranged to meet Sharon at a safe location, an old ranger station on the edge of Pine Hollow. She arrived pale, shaking, holding a thumb drive like it was a bomb. "These files, they recorded everything. Karen didn't know I had backups. She always said if anything went wrong, the investors would clean it up." We listened to the first audio file. Karen's voice crackled through the speaker. "I don't care what it takes. Fine him. Paint him as unstable. Get him off that land. Randall wants the property cleared before October. He said if I can't do it quietly, he'll bring in legal to bleed the ranch dry." There it was. Motive, conspiracy, proof. Sharon looked at me. "They won't stop, Mr. Jensen. They want your land, because once they take you down, no one else in the state will resist." I looked her in the eyes. "Then we stop them here, for everyone's sake." It started like any other day on the ranch, mist rising over the pond, the scent of hay lingering in the air. But the air was thick with something else. Tension. Because today wasn't just another day. Today was the day Karen Bancroft and Thomas Randall stood trial. The courthouse in Redstone Ridge was packed. The media crowded the lawn, cameras angled at the entrance as I walked in with Daphne and Sharon at my side. We weren't just plaintiffs anymore. We were witnesses, survivors. The courtroom was a war zone of lawyers. Karen, wearing a smug smile and her signature silver blazer, sat flanked by two high-powered attorneys. Beside her, surprisingly calm, sat Thomas Randall, the man who tried to erase my legacy with ink and threats. But they didn't look so confident once the judge walked in, and once Daphne stood up. She opened with fire. Your Honor, this is not a case about neighborly disputes or petty fines. This is about the systemic abuse of HOA power used to strip people of their homes, dignity, and security. The defendants weaponized bureaucracy to commit fraud, launder funds, and attempt the illegal seizure of private property, including that of my client, Mason Jensen. She laid it all out: the forged liens, the fake auction, the shell companies tied to Randall, Karen's own voice recordings, and then the witness bombshell. Sharon took the stand, voice trembling but clear. Karen told me if anyone resisted, we were to fine them into foreclosure. She said Randall promised a 10% kickback on every claimed property. They even had a spreadsheet. Mason's ranch was labeled Phase 1. Gasps echoed through the room. Then the DA played the recording. If we can't get him to crack, we frame him. Randall says the press will believe anything if he looks angry enough. Karen's face went sheet white. Randall didn't even blink. But it was my turn on the stand that truly shifted the room. I didn't shout. I didn't accuse. I told the story. Of rebuilding the barn with my father's hands, of donating land to a local animal rescue, of the moment I came home to see my ranch listed for auction, like I didn't exist. She didn't just try to steal my land, I said. She tried to destroy my name, my family's legacy, and she would have gotten away with it if I hadn't come home 2 days early. There wasn't a dry eye in the front row. The defense tried everything. They called me volatile. They called Sharon a bitter ex-employee. They even claimed Karen wasn't aware of Randall's schemes, until Daphne showed a wire transfer from Randall's firm directly to her personal account, labeled Phase Bonus. And just when they thought things couldn't get worse, the sheriff's office played surveillance footage of a figure, matching Randall's build, at my ranch boundary, holding a jerry can, the night of the attempted arson. Game over. The judge didn't even take 24 hours. Karen Bancroft guilty on 14 counts, including wire fraud, attempted property theft, false reporting, and conspiracy. Thomas Randall guilty on 9 counts, including criminal conspiracy, bribery, and racketeering. Sentences: Karen, 15 years, minimum of 8 without parole. Randall, 22 years, federal prison. Assets seized. Sharon entered witness protection under the Whistleblower Act. And me, I got my life back. But the story didn't end with the gavel, because now the Take Back the Land Act, inspired by our case, was passed in the state legislature. HOAs statewide were placed under new transparency laws, forced audits, power limits. The ranch? I rebuilt everything Karen tore down, stronger, cleaner, with a new sign at the gate that read, Lone Trail Acres, not for sale, not ever. And one final letter arrived in the mail, handwritten, no return address. You won, cowboy, but there's always another ridge. MTR, Randall may be behind bars, but others like him. They were watching, waiting, but now they knew. Not all land is for the taking. Some of us fight back. 3 months later, the ranch was quiet again. But it was a different kind of quiet, the peaceful kind. The storm had passed, and though scars remained, broken fences, media vans long gone, courtroom echoes still fresh, the air felt cleaner. I stood at the edge of the pasture, watching the horses graze beneath golden light. A soft wind rolled across the land. It was the first time in over a year that I didn't feel like I was under siege. It wasn't just that Karen was gone. It was that justice had landed. The land was mine again, not just legally, but spiritually. I'd spent weeks restoring everything she'd tried to undo. Rebuilt the western fence line, this time with stronger steel posts. replanted the flower bed she'd once fined my late mother over, painted the barn back to its original crimson color, the one Karen called too aggressive. And I didn't do it alone. Neighbors who once kept their distance now offered tools, hands, and time. Old Man Harris even brought over his vintage John Deere to help me reseed the pasture. People were healing too. Karen had ruled Redstone Ridge with fear. Now community was blooming where control once stood. We weren't just fixing property. We were reclaiming our identity. Meanwhile, Daphne kept busy finalizing the class action settlement. Each of the 17 homeowners would receive compensation from the liquidated assets of Karen and Randall. Their shell companies had been unraveled like cobwebs, one offshore account at a time. Millions were frozen. Thousands returned. "I can't believe we pulled this off," I told her one evening as we watched the sun dip behind the barn. "You didn't just win a case, Mason," she said. "You sparked a state movement. Other counties are forming anti-abuse HOA coalitions, and there's talk of national reform." She smiled. "You've become a symbol." I laughed. "That was never the plan." "Symbols never plan on being symbols," she said. "They just stand when others would have run." Tasha Gilmore's final documentary segment aired that month. It ended with a wide shot of me opening the new ranch gate, the fresh sign swinging in the wind. "Lone Trail Acres. Not for sale. Not ever." She closed with my words from the courtroom. "My father didn't build this place for someone else's profit. He built it for roots, for family. And no one, no matter how rich or powerful, gets to put a price on that." The response? Over 20 million views. Letters poured in from across the country. Veterans, farmers, single moms, retirees. All of them thanking me for standing when they couldn't. It was humbling. But I didn't fight to be famous. I fought because this land is mine. Karen's story faded into the background, just a footnote in court records and HOA reform meetings. Randall's case would continue for years as prosecutors unraveled his national network. I'd started working with their investigative team, offering insights, patterns, even strategies he tried to use against me. Funny how a man who tried to buy my silence now had to answer my questions through bulletproof glass. Cliff Denton, captured in Arizona, extradited, facing trial. He cried in court. But I didn't need vengeance. I already had victory. One crisp October morning, almost a year to the day Karen tried to sell my ranch, I walked the ridge behind the cabin. The leaves were turning fire orange, the wind gentle. At the top of the hill, I placed a bronze plaque into the earth. It was simple. "In memory of Frank Jensen, built with honor, defended with fire. This land stands because you did." I stood in silence, hand on the stone, heart full. Not everything survives the storm. But some things. They were built to. And just as I turned to head back, I saw something on the horizon. A black SUV parked at the tree line. Again. But this time it didn't matter. I wasn't afraid anymore. I was ready, because this time they'd know better.